Pemaquid Communications, innovative, accessible web design and development from offices in Portland, Maine. On the web at pemaquid.com.
Welcome. This is our Afterthoughts segment where we keep our guests around for some extended conversation. Today we are talking about the future of rail in Maine, both freight and passenger service, and we have with us today Nate Moulton, the Director of Maine Department of Transportation's Rail Program, and Sue Moreau, Policy Development Specialist with the Maine Department of Transportation. Thanks for sticking around. We just barely touched the tip of that iceberg. So we want to spend a little more time. And we were talking during the break, Nate, I wanted you to talk a little bit about just in general that mix of transportation, freight, movement of freight. You know, that whole, I was reading some of the articles about this, that whole change in the way that businesses do their work now. The Bill Cohen of Verso paper was saying that they're served by Pan Am Railways. They noted that 55% of their products are now moved by trucks, and he says that the days of having 100 years of paper sitting in a warehouse are long gone. So they're really looking at keeping their costs down, being more just in time, and some of that works for rail and some of it doesn't. So talk about the bigger strategy that the department has.
Yeah, I mean, the department as a whole, I work within the Office of Freight and Business Services at the department, and our focus is on, you know, mine is on rail, but we also work with folks on the Maine Port Authority, is within the Office of Freight, and developing and promoting the ports, as well as you know, truck issues, truck weights and things of that nature, and the transportation mix as a whole. And so, as you point out with Verso, a lot of the outbound now is just in time and by truckload or even less than truckload in some cases.
Right.
But what's important to the paper mills, I think they would all tell you, is on the inbound side for their chemicals, things like clay to whiten the paper, limestone slurry, calcium carbonate, all those things. Without rail, they couldn't make it work. Those, again, are very low-value commodities, in many cases coming very long distances away, and come all completely inbound by rail, or 90% by rail, because you can handle, you know, you can put 3 to 4 truckloads in a rail car. And again, a lot of that stuff comes into the port, gets put on a rail car, and then goes to the mill. So, you know, the mills rely on all 3 modes. Drag and cement is another one where they have their own barge. They load that from rail cars in Rockland, as well as truck the outbound product. So, I mean, again, and what we do is work with businesses and help them in any way that we can to, you know, with that mix and finding the right recipe that helps keep them in business. Because that, again, that's what it's about. All these transportation alternatives rely on the businesses being here, and they don't work if the business is not here.
That's right. It's all about the bottom line at some point. And so that's my question then is, when you're doing that mix, I'm sure you guys sit up there and you've got the formulas out and you're looking at all this. At some point, sometimes the mix doesn't work. And for a region in particular, how does, in terms of setting policy, how do you get to decide that? How, when you've worked in as many ways as you can, we've looked at all the possible ways of moving freight in and out, and boy, rail's just not going to pay for itself there, but it's going to have an impact on that community. What do you do with that?
You look at a couple different things. One is, do you move it partway by truck and then put it transloading, things like that, intermodal facilities, things of that nature, because Maine is a very rural state, and there's got to be some of that. And sometimes it is a truck. I mean, I work in the rail section, but sometimes rail isn't a good alternative, and we'll say that, you know, we try to go out, we listen to the businesses, we tell them, you know, they tell us what they need, and we work with that rather than us looking at some sort of dynamic and tell them you really ought to do this. We'll say, this is what might be available to you, and we'll try to connect you with the right people. But at the end of the day, you know, it's up to the businesses to guide it, and it's up to government to try to do what we can to help them.
Right, and I think at some point, too, the mills certainly were the anchors for many of these industrial communities. If the mills not be able to make it, or if they change dramatically their business structure and what they're shipping in and out, it's going to have an impact on those businesses that circle around the mill, that feed off of it, so to speak. And if rail stops for them, then it stops for all those little businesses too. So that's the real hurt, I think.
And some of it's beyond just the transportation. It's packaging or things of that nature. We talk a lot about you know, water. A lot of water goes out of the state in bottles. And you know, we've even done some trial runs on rail, and because those light plastic bottles that are much more environmentally friendly, you can't stack them very high. So it's hard to put them in a railroad car so that you can take advantage of the additional space in a rail car, and a ride on the rail can be rough at times. And so water is very, if you have any product damage, your profit goes away in a hurry.
Right.
And so Again, that's not a product that we found a great way to move yet by rail.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Yeah.
it's things like that, and again, so sometimes you can be of assistance, sometimes you can't.
Right. Right. Let's talk about passengers again. Sue, I wanted to get to, one of the things we didn't get to cover is that subsidy part, and we were talking before the show too, that all passenger rail is subsidized.
Right.
That's true. That's a true statement. I mean,
To a certain extent, yes.
But is it always going to have to be that? Is it never going to be able to pay for itself?
Well, transit as a whole is subsidized.
Yeah.
Any of the bus services that you see around the state, usually the federal funding comes in at 50%, 50-50. You have to match it with local money. And that means municipality has to contribute, or you may find a business that benefits from that service that may chip in and also support it as well. And we try to do that whenever we can.
Right.
So it's not that rail is unique. All of these transit services are subsidized in some respect. And it's a combination of federal and local money that is put into it. The capital is usually a little different. It's easier to come by because there's more, the federal government puts more investment in that. It's usually at an 80% level. So that's easier to come by.
In deciding what routes to focus on for passenger and where to possibly expand, how does the department do that? How do you, when you're looking at your strategic thinking, how did you decide, let's look at this Auburn route versus this other route? And
well, certainly, Lewiston is the second largest population in the state. That is key. And we also know that we have a service that it can be built onto. This study focused on connecting to the Downeaster service. So it would be there. We've already have a successful service in mind. We already have the infrastructure in place. We actually also have an operator with Amtrak. So a lot of these things were already done. And the folks from the Lewiston-Auburn area, their legislators, their community leaders, really asked the department to take a look.
Yeah, so they see it as important for
they sure do.
For their economic development.
Exactly.
And why is that? Why do they see passengers so important to them?
Again, the economic development around station communities there's more impact than you would see to, say, a bus service. You know, you're able to add amenities that go along with travel, connectivity to a rental car, connectivity to transit.
Do they see it as business travelers, or are they vacationer travelers, or what's the real? What do they, when they got to say, yeah, I'm going to have X amount of economic impact? Where's the real?
The inner city service is people going to a destination.
Okay.
They're either going to Boston, or the reverse. They're coming into Portland to visit and activities. Certainly with the New Brunswick service, people will be interested in going to Freeport and on to Brunswick to take care of, to have activities and shop and whatever. So that's what you get with inner city. When you're talking about commuter service, that's somebody going to work, and that needs to be more frequent. So what we were studying was the inner city, more of the tourists. That's why Bethel ended up becoming an important factor.
Frankly, obviously that one resonates really clearly. It's like, oh, because you go there to ski or whatever else, the other summertime things they do as well. And it's obviously a destination, very specific destination for vacationing. But that one makes sense in its sense that people would want to end up there for that purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'd say once again, it gets down to the number of riders, I guess, that would be able to sustain it over time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And you know, you need to prove when you're trying to Auburn to Portland was 40 minutes is what we projected in the study.
And Bethel?
Bethel was about an hour and 40 minutes.
Okay. And how long to Montreal?
To Montreal, almost 8 hours.
Okay. But it's a lovely 8 hours.
It
right? Okay. Yeah, and the other way around, talking about people coming into, you project, I think it was 200,000 possible coming from Montreal into Maine that this would allow. Obviously, we'd have going out as well, but coming in. Are those new and different tourists that we wouldn't have had otherwise?
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Exactly.
And how did you come to that data?
It's the ridership model. When they were, for instance, looking at the Auburn to Portland service, they were looking at unique riders, people that wouldn't necessarily have driven up to Portland anyway. These are new riders. And the same thing for the Montreal service. And it's the model that Amtrak uses nationally, which based on your regional interest, what services there are already for transportation, what the air service looks like, how people travel, what the education and the economic level of the people are, and so on. Okay. It's all built into this model.
The question I have for you is kind of the same. It's a similar question that I had for Nate, which his was why not trucks, and yours is why not buses? Can't we accomplish the same thing and not have to? It'd be easier, faster, cheaper. I don't know.
It's a different service. It usually attracts a different people. It's for us in our area. It's been somebody who is going on a leisurely trip, whereas the bus service has been more of a commuter situation and so on. It's not the trip in itself. Rail service is a trip in itself.
Rail service is the experience of it.
Exactly.
Okay. So and people want that. The question is, how much do they want?
Right,
yeah. Okay,
exactly.
got it, okay. My final question, because we do have to wrap, is I live in Rockland. How come we can't get Amtrak all the way to Rockland? It comes to Brunswick, and I got to change trains, and I got to get on that Maine Eastern thing. You know, you talk about tracks and speeds, and I know that Guilford's always the problem there. I think that's the problem. Or was that still the problem, or was that the tracks weren't fast enough? Is that ever going to, what would change something like that?
Demand, again, with Amtrak, you need a certain amount of population and that type of thing to make it work. And so they're looking, it's kind of like airlines where, you know, Delta doesn't necessarily fly into Augusta. They look for an operator to run out there and feed them. It's kind of the same thing with the Amtrak. And it
may be just as well as it can get. I mean, if Maine Eastern can make money off of that, and they're doing fine and connects, and the trick always was, we were always talking about that multimodal piece, and at one time we were talking about the CAT high-speed ferry possibly out of Rockland and going up to Nova Scotia, Bar Harbor and then Nova Scotia. That whole kind of concept of the vehicle-less vacation to the mid-coast and beyond, man.
And it's connectivity.
Yeah.
You know, when we're trying to deploy these modes, we think about that all the time.
Well, I'll say one last thing about that. I used to do economic development work out in the mid-coast area, and when we were talking to Boston Financial Data Service about coming to Rockland, they put a pin on the map and they said, we'll look at everything that's in the 200-mile area of Boston about where we want to go, and it was something about the fact that there was a rail stop there. Even though they would never ever use it, it really wasn't a practical way. That didn't matter. It's just it helped them think, well, this isn't the end of the earth exactly. You can actually get here, you know. So things like that matter, I guess.
It sure does.
Conceptually, anyhow. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Apply for federal money. You have to prove ridership. You have to prove that this is going to be a benefit and that the federal investment is going to be a good one.
Right.
So that's very important to have these studies that prove that need to the federal government to say, yes, we can invest in this service and it's going to be a benefit to all of us, and, you know, including the state.
Right. You know, we hear a lot these days about high-speed rail. Is that in our future at all? What does that mean?
I think it's a little misnomer, frankly, because 79 miles per hour, we probably wouldn't consider that as high speed, although that corridor is designated for that, for 70 miles an hour, 79 miles an hour.
Which corridor?
The Portland corridor, there it is right now. I think we all know about other services in Europe and that are much faster than that, and certainly Americans don't have that way to get that fast on a rail line, pretty much because of the fact that our infrastructure is such that you can't, in the Northeast corridor, you can't go that fast. You're just not able to do that. I think the Acela gets up to 150. Maybe 150. That's about the top that we're getting up to.
And that's because of the quality of our tracks, the lay of the land.
It's geometry. It's a mixture, because, you know, on those lines you have commuter trains from the MBTA as well as freight trains. That's, you know, when you look at the services in the Orient as well as Europe, those are dedicated passenger. They're the only ones out there, and they don't have to worry about a freight train going 40 miles an hour and those interactions and those types of things. And that's what we don't have here. We operate, all passenger rail operates on primarily on freight lines.
Okay.
And our most congested corridor is where we can't necessarily go as fast. Out west, you probably could get up to very high speeds because you have those straight regional areas from one to the other, miles of straightaway, whereas we don't get that in the Northeast Corridor.
So the Auburn to Portland, what's the time?